Single dad unleashes hidden skill to save CEO from kidnappers. Her response left everyone in tears. In the sleepy town of Fairgrove, Vermont, the late October air was cool, crisp, and scented with pine and burning leaves. Main Street moved at the pace of a yawn. Just how Ben Taylor, owner of Taylor's Auto and Repair, liked it. His garage sat at the end of the block, a place more known for fresh coffee and free air checks than emergencies. With his sleeves rolled up, grease on his hands, and Johnny Cash playing faintly in the background, Ben was closing up shop for the evening. Then came the sound. Tires screeched. A black SUV skidded into view. But before Ben could process it, another car, a luxury BMW sedan, black as midnight and badly battered, came flying toward him. It crashed through the curb, slamming to a halt just feet from his garage. Smoke hissed from under the hood. The driver's side door flew open. A woman stumbled out. Her heels were gone. Her face was streaked with dirt and blood. Her coat, a designer brand out of place in this working-class town, was torn at the shoulder. "Help me," she cried, eyes wild. "They're coming." Ben didn't blink. From the fog down the road, two matte black SUVs emerged, cruising low and menacing like sharks on the hunt. Their headlights were off. When the doors opened, it wasn't lawmen who stepped out. It was something far colder. Men in dark tactical gear, rifles drawn, eyes hidden behind visors. Ben set his wrench down carefully. This wasn't the first time danger had rolled into his world, but it was the first time it came barreling into Fairgrove. His eyes, dark calculating, swept the scene. The woman was about 30, clearly in distress but alert. Her movements, even disoriented, showed signs of training. She crouched low, used the car as partial cover, and kept glancing back to track her pursuers. Ben's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Inside, now!" The woman didn't question it. She moved, and in that instant, the quiet mechanic's mask slipped off. What emerged was someone else. Not the guy who rebuilt carburetors and coached Little League. No. This Ben moved like a man who had seen war up close. Like someone who once kicked down doors in places the news never talked about. His flannel shirt and oil-stained jeans couldn't hide the scars on his knuckles, or the fire behind his steady hands. As the woman darted into the garage, Ben hit the metal switch on the side wall. The garage door thundered shut. The world outside dimmed. Silence fell, but only for a moment, because the storm was coming, and Ben Taylor, former Force Recon Marine, was ready to greet it. This was no ordinary night in Fairgrove, and the woman who crash-landed into his life. She wasn't who she claimed to be, but then again, neither was he. The moment the garage door slammed shut, the atmosphere inside changed. The fluorescent lights flickered above the concrete floor, casting long shadows over the scattered tools and oil-stained rags. The silence was thick, held taut by adrenaline and dread. Ben moved with practiced calm, ushering the woman behind a heavy steel workbench. "Stay low. Don't move unless I say." His voice wasn't loud, but it cut with the clean edge of command. She didn't argue. Something in his tone, unmistakable, unflinching, told her he was used to people obeying. Outside footsteps crunched on gravel. 3, maybe 4 men sweeping the perimeter. Ben counted their movements through the walls. The pattern was familiar. Too familiar. He crouched beside a battered metal cabinet and pulled out something not usually found in your average Vermont mechanic shop. A compact tactical first aid kit, a combat flashlight, and a collapsible baton with a reinforced grip. The woman whispered from behind the bench. Who are you?" Ben didn't answer. Not yet. He was listening, processing, calculating. And then the first breach, a side door creaked open. It wasn't forced. It was picked. Quiet, clean, surgical. "Clear left." A voice came from beyond the garage wall, low, professional, military. Ben was already moving. He ducked behind the hydraulic lift, gliding through the space like a predator stalking familiar ground. His fingers found a ratchet wrench, heavy and balanced. Not a weapon by design, but deadly enough in the right hands. The first man entered, a black-clad figure sweeping left with an assault rifle. His eyes tracked high, scanning the ceiling, missing the shadow to his right. Ben struck. A brutal arc to the temple dropped the man instantly. His rifle clattered to the floor. No gunfire, no scream, just a thud. Ben dragged the body behind a stack of tires and took the earpiece from the fallen commando. Echo 3 down, a voice crackled through. Status check. Ben clicked the mic once, then cut the line. He turned to the woman. What did you do to get people like this chasing you? She looked stunned. It's not what I did, it's what I know. There wasn't time for more. Another shadow moved near the service bay doors. Ben hurled a socket wrench, dead center, into the second man's helmet. The force staggered him long enough for Ben to close the gap, twist his arm and disarm him. 2 down, Ben muttered, breath steady. The woman stared, not just amazed, but shaken. You're not a mechanic, she whispered. Ben glanced at her eyes hard. Not just sirens wailed in the distance. The town was waking up, but the threat wasn't over. Ben knew these men, not by name, but by rhythm. Their methodical approach, their silence, it screamed black ops, rogue unit, disavowed, the kind that doesn't leave witnesses. He turned to the woman again. What's your name? She hesitated. Rebecca, but something in the way she said it, too smooth, too quick, told him she was lying. Outside, the final SUV pulled away its engine, growling into the woods. Retreating, regrouping. Ben's shoulders didn't relax. This wasn't over. No, this was the opening move in a much bigger game. And Ben Taylor had just been forced back onto the board. The dust was still settling in the garage when the woman finally spoke again. Her voice, low and controlled, carried a subtle tremor, one that came from someone used to hiding fear behind protocol. Thank you for saving my life. Ben didn't answer right away. He was too busy resetting the door locks and checking the back exit. His mind was spinning, but his movements were crisp, precise. This wasn't just a firefight. This was a targeted extraction attempt, and the woman before him was the target. When he finally looked at her, he didn't see just a victim. He saw the way her eyes flicked toward each entrance every 30 seconds, like a clock in her head was ticking through perimeter checks. He noticed her hand twitch toward the inside of her blazer, right where a weapon might have been if she hadn't been disarmed. And he clocked her shoes, or lack thereof. The scuffs on her heels weren't from a panicked run. They were from hours of travel on rough ground. Ben walked to the mini fridge in the corner, pulled out a bottle of water, and handed it to her. That was a trained team outside, not some bored mercs. They didn't come to scare you. They came to disappear you. The woman, Rebecca, took the water, but didn't drink. She studied him. You're former military, she said quietly. Special forces by the way you moved. Ben's expression didn't change. And you, he asked, leaning back against the workbench. She took a long breath, then finally said, I work in national security. I'm not at liberty to say more. That answer wasn't good enough, not for Ben. So he did what he did best. He observed. Every twitch of her fingers, every deflection in her tone, the pause before answering. It was like watching a chess player who knew how to bluff with every move. But even the best players make mistakes. He opened a drawer beneath the workbench and pulled out her purse, which had flown onto the floor during the crash. Flipping it open, he retrieved a sleek business card, thick cardstock minimalist font. Rebecca Lane, Chief Executive Officer, Sentinel Solutions, Strategic Defense Technologies. Ben whistled. This you. Rebecca gave the faintest nod. He turned the card over. Tiny microprint glinted along the edge. Clearance tags, Department of Defense endorsements. So, you don't just work in security, you build it. Now she looked up. They're after something I designed, she admitted. A surveillance platform, autonomous, predictive, capable of identifying threats before they act. Ben crossed his arms. Predictive AI? She nodded. Yes. He took a step closer. And you thought hiding in a BMW and driving through farmland was your best option. No, she said, that was a last resort. Her voice cracked just slightly. And for the first time, Ben saw it. Not the composure, not the corporate mask, but the fear and the loneliness. She had been running for a long time. Suddenly, a memory clicked in his mind. 2 hours ago, right before closing, that same BMW had pulled into his station. He'd noticed the car, clean, sleek, foreign to this town. He remembered her getting out calm, but scanning her surroundings. The way her hand never strayed far from her bag. The way she watched every vehicle pass. It all made sense now. She'd been running then too. You came here on purpose, Ben said, narrowing his eyes. Why my shop? She hesitated. Because someone told me that if I was ever in trouble, I should find Ben Taylor in Fairgrove. His breath caught. Who told you that? Colonel Raymond Nash. The name hit Ben like a lightning bolt to the chest. Nash, his old CO, the man who'd pulled him out of a burning convoy in Kandahar, the man who'd vanished off the grid 5 years ago. Now he was in this. Ben stepped back, heart pounding. A spiderweb of secrets was spreading across the walls of his shop, and at the center of it stood this woman, with eyes full of truths too dangerous to name. He didn't know where this was going, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't just fixing engines anymore. He was about to fix a whole damn mess that went far deeper than busted oil lines. The stillness was a lie. Ben could feel it in his bones. The kind of quiet that comes right before impact. A trained kind of silence where breath is measured and every sound becomes amplified. The ticking of the clock on the wall, the low hum of fluorescent lights, even the soft scuff of Rebecca's feet on concrete. They were being watched. Ben flicked the breaker. The lights went out. Shadows consumed the garage, plunging them into a darkness he knew how to navigate far better than those outside. He moved quickly, whispering just enough for her to hear. Stay behind the engine hoist. Don't move unless I tell you. Don't make a sound. Rebecca crouched low behind the rusted metal beast as Ben slipped into the far corner. He had just enough time to wedge a crowbar into the rear service door, jamming it shut before the breach happened. The side window exploded inward. Glass shards rained across the floor. A flashbang hit the ground and detonated with a thunderous boom, filling the room with a white-hot pulse of light. But Ben had already turned away, eyes closed, muscles tensed. As the dust cleared, 2 figures stormed in. They moved with military efficiency, covering corners, sweeping through the shadows with weapons at the ready. Their night vision goggles cast a ghostly green glow across the darkness. Room clear. The lead man took a step too far. Ben dropped from the ceiling beam like a hammer. He landed hard on the intruder's shoulders, slamming him into the floor. The second spun toward the noise, but Ben was faster. He hurled a heavy socket wrench across the room. It collided with the man's goggles, shattering the lens and disorienting him. Ben moved like a ghost in his own territory. He knew every hiding spot, every blind corner. The second man raised his rifle, but Ben was already on him, twisting the muzzle away and driving a knee into his solar plexus. The attacker wheezed, dropped the weapon, and hit the ground with a grunt. Ben exhaled. 2 down. But there were more. Footsteps scraped along the metal rooftop. Ben's eyes shot to the skylight. They're coming through the roof, he muttered. He moved to the storage cabinet and opened a locked drawer with a key that had been collecting dust for 5 years. Inside was something he never thought he'd need again. His old combat sidearm wrapped in an oil-stained rag. Alongside it, a tactical belt and a flare gun. Rebecca peeked out from her hiding spot, eyes wide. You were prepared for this. Didn't want to be, Ben said, strapping on the belt. But I've had bad dreams before. A loud clang echoed as the skylight shattered. 2 more men descended on zip lines, hitting the floor like shadows. Ben popped the flare gun and fired into the far corner, flooding the space with searing red light. The attackers froze for a split second, long enough for Ben to lunge. He used the garage's hydraulic lift like a trap, slamming it down on one man's leg while catching the other in a chokehold. They fought hard, but Ben fought harder. Every move was survival. Every second bought meant one more breath for Rebecca and for himself. He drove one man into a metal shelf, collapsing it in a deafening crash of tools and sparks. The last man reached for his sidearm. Too slow. Ben grabbed a pair of jumper cables and shocked him into unconsciousness. In the flickering red glow of the flare, the garage looked like a war zone. Ben's chest heaved, his shirt soaked in sweat and grit. But he was standing, and they were not. Rebecca stepped out, stunned. You took out 5 of them, alone. Ben gave a half smile, more fatigue than triumph. They weren't ready for a guy who knows how to turn a repair shop into a battlefield. He sat down on an overturned crate, finally catching his breath. His knuckles were bleeding. His heart was racing. We're not safe here anymore, he said. Rebecca nodded slowly. Then where do we go? Ben looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, not as a stranger, but as someone who might understand what it means to survive things you never speak of. Somewhere they can't follow, he said, and to do that, I need to know everything. As the echo of combat faded into the night, Ben took a long breath and checked the perimeter. The intruders were either unconscious or restrained, for now. He glanced toward the rear exit and cursed under his breath. He hadn't heard the back gate creak open, not over the chaos. Too late. A soft skipping sound approached, light footsteps against pavement. A moment later, the back door flung wide open. "Daddy." The voice was small, high, and perfectly calm. Ben froze. There, framed in the doorway, stood Maddie, his 8-year-old daughter, wearing a unicorn pajama set and a concerned frown. A pink backpack bounced against her shoulders as she walked in, completely unfazed by the devastation that surrounded her. Her eyes swept across the scene-shattered glass, scorched metal, 5 unconscious men, and Rebecca bloodied and wide-eyed in the corner. Maddie tilted her head. "You were fixing things again, weren't you?" Ben forced a smile. "Kinda, sweetheart. Just had a complicated repair job tonight." She stepped over a downed commando like it was a puddle and walked straight to Rebecca. "Are you hurt? You have blood on your face." Rebecca blinked still, kneeling near the overturned bench. I'm okay," but Maddie wasn't convinced. Without waiting for permission, she dropped her bag and unzipped the front pocket. Out came a child-sized first aid kit, worn from use, and full of Band-Aids, antiseptic, and a tiny flashlight. "I can help. Daddy taught me first aid after the tornado drill last year." Ben's chest tightened. He wasn't proud that she had to learn these things, but he'd taught her anyway. Because life had shown him, more than once, that safety was an illusion. Maddie cleaned the blood from Rebecca's cheek with gentle fingers, then smiled. "All done?" Rebecca stared at her, stunned by the calmness, the confidence. "You're really something," she whispered. "Does your mom know how brave you are?" Maddie's smile faded, just a little. "She's in heaven," she said matter-of-factly. "She died in a car accident when I was 5. Rebecca's expression crumpled. The words hit her like a punch to the chest. But Maddie wasn't looking for sympathy. She sat cross-legged beside her and pulled out a worn tablet. "Want to see something cool?" she asked, switching topics with the grace only a child possesses. On the screen, lines of colorful code danced. Animation bloomed into life. "Daddy taught me how to code last summer. This one's a maze game, but the walls move depending on your choices. I use logic gates and—" Rebecca couldn't help it. She laughed. For the first time all day, a real unfiltered laugh. Maddie's enthusiasm was contagious, her brilliance impossible to ignore. Ben stood nearby, watching them with quiet intensity. The weight in his eyes, visible only to those who knew loss, softened as his daughter leaned comfortably against a woman who just hours ago was a stranger. It was like watching 2 halves of his world merge. Outside, police sirens wailed faintly. Fairgrove was responding late and unprepared for what had just unfolded. Ben wasn't worried about the cops. Not yet. But something tugged at his mind. Rebecca's presence had triggered all of this. The timing, the violence, the fact that Maddie had walked in on a literal battlefield and treated it like a science fair told him everything he needed to know. His life could no longer be separated into before and after. Rebecca was a storm. A beautiful, dangerous storm. And somehow, his daughter had already let her in. The town of Fairgrove was coming alive again. Red and blue lights flashed against trees and rooftops as police cruisers arrived, their tires crunching over broken glass in the alley behind Ben's shop. Inside, the chaos had settled, but the silence was now heavier, thick with unsaid truths. Rebecca sat at the corner of Ben's workbench, bandaged, exhausted but alert. Her eyes tracked every movement. Ben at the window, Maddie putting away her tablet, the officer knocking at the front door. Always assessing, always calculating. Ben stepped forward to meet Deputy Sheriff Ray Colton, a weathered man with suspicion written into every frown line. "Everything all right here, Ben?" Ben nodded slowly. "Had a situation, handled it." Colton glanced past him at the unconscious men, the smoldering garage floor, and the high-tech weapons resting on the workbench. "You sure this wasn't more than a situation?" Ben didn't flinch. "Some aggressive guys followed her from the highway. Thought they'd scare her off the road. They messed with the wrong shop." Colton arched an eyebrow. "That your official story?" Before Ben could answer, Rebecca stepped forward. She looked every bit the executive again. Composed, controlled. The bandage on her temple didn't shake her voice one bit. "My name is Rebecca Lane," she said smoothly. "I work with Sentinel Solutions. I develop defense technologies. Sometimes that makes me a target." Colton paused. He didn't like what he was hearing, but he also knew he was out of his depth. You got a badge A contact number. Rebecca reached into her purse and handed him a card, white embossed and lined with microtext. Colton squinted at it. So, this is one of those need-to-know situations. Rebecca nodded. Unfortunately, yes. Ben watched her closely. Not because he doubted her, but because he didn't. And that scared him more. After the deputies took statements and promised to escalate things to the right channels, Ben locked the doors and pulled the blinds. He set his phone to silent and turned off the garage lights. Then he sat down across from Rebecca. That wasn't your first time talking to law enforcement under pressure. She shook her head. I used to give briefings to senators. This was easier. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Let's stop dancing. Who are you really, Rebecca? She hesitated, just long enough to answer without saying much. Let's just say I've worked with 3-letter agencies. My company didn't just build surveillance tools. I helped design systems for homeland intelligence in battlefields Ben rubbed his jaw. And they're after you because I know too much, she replied. About a program called Project Orion. About a colonel who's selling secrets to foreign buyers. And about what happens to assets who stop being useful. Ben's heart rate ticked up. Say that name again. Rebecca looked him straight in the eye. Colonel Julian Rourke. The blood drained from Ben's face. Rourke, a name he hadn't heard in 5 years. Not since Kandahar. Not since the mission that had ended with 4 body bags and a helicopter that never came. Ben stood abruptly, pushing away from the bench. You know him, he demanded. He trained me, she said, her voice darkening. Said I reminded him of someone he'd lost. Ben stared out the window, fists clenched. He didn't lose them. He left them. Rebecca's breath caught. You were there, weren't you? Ben turned slowly. I carried someone out of that hellhole, a CIA asset. She was unconscious. I never even saw her face. The room went still. Rebecca reached slowly into the collar of her blouse. Around her neck hung a pair of worn dog tags, half buried beneath fabric and dust. She held them up. Ben's knees nearly buckled. Those aren't yours, he whispered. They were, she said softly. I woke up wearing them. No memory, no name, just this. The shadows that had been circling Ben's heart for years finally took shape. She was the asset, the ghost he'd never stopped dreaming about. And now she was sitting in his garage alive, but hunted. A woman with no past who had just collided into his. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Not because there was nothing to say, but because both of them knew the truth had finally caught up. Ben stared at the dog tags still dangling from Rebecca's neck. His tags. The ones he had fastened around an unconscious agent's throat 5 years ago before carrying her on his back through gunfire, shattered glass, and betrayal. He thought they'd been lost in the wreckage of that cursed mission. But there they were, still warm against her skin. Those tags. His voice cracked something he hadn't let happen in years. I gave them to a woman I thought I'd never see again. Rebecca's hands trembled as she unclipped the chain and handed it to him. I don't remember the mission. Not clearly, just flashes, screams, heat, hands pulling me out of rubble. Ben traced the edge of the steel tags with his thumb. You were the objective, the one we were sent to extract. Her gaze locked onto his, sharp and questioning. Then you were Sergeant Benjamin Taylor, Force Recon, Operation Black Echo, Kandahar Province, 2017. Rebecca swallowed hard. The dam of emotion was starting to crack. Rourke told me I'd been rescued, that the others didn't make it. Ben's jaw clenched. His knuckles whitened around the dog tags. We could have all made it. We were this close. But Rourke called off the extraction, said it was too risky. We lost 4 men that day. Good men. My brothers. He paced the garage floor, trying to burn off the rising fury in his chest. And now, the same man who left us for dead is sending kill squads to eliminate you? Rebecca nodded. Because I started remembering things I wasn't supposed to. The locations of off-the-books weapons labs, the passcodes to private servers, and, most dangerous of all, the names of foreign officials he's been selling intel to. Ben stared at her. She wasn't just collateral damage anymore. She was a threat Rourke couldn't allow to live. He's running a black market operation using U.S. tech and insider intel. She took a breath, and I was his ace in the hole. Ben shook his head slowly. No, You were the scapegoat. He planned to burn you the moment you became a liability. Rebecca sat down hard, the weight of it all crashing onto her shoulders. I didn't ask for any of this. Ben crouched beside her. None of us did. She looked up, eyes glistening. Why'd you carry me out that night? Why not just leave me? Ben didn't hesitate. Because we don't leave people behind. Ever. It was a simple answer, but it meant everything. She studied him. There was something familiar in his eyes now. Not just recognition, but trust. That unspoken bond forged in fire. Rourke must know you're helping me now, she said. Then he'll be coming again. Ben nodded. Good, let him. Rebecca's brow furrowed. You're not scared. I was, he said, rising to his feet. For 5 years I've been scared that the world would go to hell and I'd have to fight again. That my daughter would be dragged into a war she never signed up for. He looked down at her, bruised, brilliant, and more dangerous than she realized. But now I know why I've been waiting. Rebecca stood too, her body still aching but steadier than before. You waited for me. Ben gave a small smile. Looks like we both survived for a reason. The moment hung between them. Not romantic, not yet, but real. They had both been betrayed, both had bled, and now both were targets of a man with a long reach and a ruthless plan. But the thing Rourke never counted on was them finding each other again. The shop was dark again, save for the soft hum of Ben's computer in the back office. A beat-up desktop with military-grade encryption software most people had no business using. But Ben wasn't most people. He sat in silence, Maddie asleep in the next room, Rebecca leaning against the doorway with a blanket draped over her shoulders. She hadn't said much since their talk. Neither had he. Some truths are too heavy for words. Ben logged into a secure channel, fingers gliding across the keys with muscle memory no civilian life could erase. Old usernames, ghost passwords. Most shouldn't have worked, but one did. A blinking red icon appeared in the corner of the screen. Unread Priority 1. Tango 77 Alpha. He clicked. The message opened short and brutal. Asset location confirmed. Retrieve package for termination or eliminate in place. Authorization Tango 77 Alpha. Confirm status within 12 hours. Ben stared at the words. A cold pressure settled in his chest. His mouth went dry. It was signed Colt Julian Rourke. He read it again and again, hoping he'd misread the meaning. He hadn't. Rourke had found Rebecca, and worse. He knew Ben was protecting her. This wasn't a warning. It was a test. Rourke was gambling that Ben still followed orders even after all this time, that loyalty, or fear, would override conscience, that he would finish what Rourke started in Kandahar. Ben's knuckles cracked. He reached down and pulled open a drawer. Inside sat a sealed case, black worn, labeled HT911 comms. With shaking hands, he opened it. Inside was a satellite transponder, pre-programmed for field use. He powered it on, just in case. Rebecca's voice came from the door. You got something, didn't you? Ben turned the screen toward her. She read it in silence, then sat down. He's always been efficient. Ben studied her. He expected me to kill you. She laughed bitterly. That's Rourke's loyalty. Praise you one moment, silence you the next. This is how he treats people, Ben asked. Only the ones who know the truth, she replied. And now, we both do. Ben stood, pacing, tension radiating from his shoulders. If he's issuing a kill order, he's coming himself. He won't trust anyone else now. Rebecca nodded, and he'll bring a team, black ops off the books. They'll be here before dawn. Ben checked the time, 3:17 a.m. The countdown had started. He leaned on the table and looked her in the eyes. If you leave now, maybe you can draw him away. Keep Maddie safe. Rebecca stared back at him, stunned. You'd let me go. Ben shook his head. No, I'd have to let you go. But I don't want to. She swallowed. I'm not running again, not this time. He moved toward the garage wall and slid open a hidden panel, revealing a steel door. Behind it, stairs descended into a concrete chamber, a shelter secure and reinforced. Rebecca blinked. Is that? A safe room, Ben said. Maddie's escape plan. She knows the drill. Food, water, radio. I built it the year after Kandahar. She stepped closer. You were expecting this. Ben shrugged. I was hoping it would never come. He handed her a backup comm device. Get her inside the bunker. Tell her it's just a drill. I'll handle everything else." Rebecca didn't move. "What about you?" Ben's voice was quiet. "I made a promise, to the man I used to be, that if I ever had the chance to do something right again, I wouldn't run." She took a long breath. "Then I'm not running either." They stood there, both of them changed, both broken, both ready. Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere deep in the woods surrounding Fairgrove, headlights cut through trees like daggers. Colonel Julian Rourke was coming. But this time, Ben Taylor wasn't walking into a trap. He was building a battlefield. By 4:10 a.m., Fairgrove was asleep, except for one house and a reinforced garage at the edge of town where war was brewing again. Ben stood in the center of his shop, a place once filled with oil drums and toolboxes now transformed into a fortress. He had rerouted power to external floodlights, reinforced the windows with steel shutters, and lined the walls with equipment that could double as weapons. Everything had purpose now. The mechanic had vanished. The Marine had returned. In the corner, Maddie stood silently as Rebecca kneeled before her, wrapping the child in a warm coat and slipping a walkie-talkie into her backpack. "You remember what to do?" Rebecca asked softly. Maddie nodded. "If I hear sirens or explosions, I go to the safe room. I stay there until I hear Dad's voice or the all-clear signal. And if something happens to your dad, I call Uncle Wes. Use the code words. Don't talk to anyone else." Rebecca swallowed a lump in her throat. "You're a very brave girl." Maddie tilted her head. "Are you scared?" Rebecca gave a soft smile. "I am, but not for me." Maddie thought for a moment. Then, with all the innocence in the world, she said, "You don't have to be scared. Daddy always wins." Ben appeared behind them, his silhouette outlined by the dim shop lights. "Time to go, kiddo." He lifted Maddie gently and carried her to the stairwell that led to the underground shelter. Before the steel door closed, he kissed her forehead. "I love you, baby. I'll see you soon." "I love you too, Daddy. Be safe." And then she was gone. The steel door sealed with a clunk. A quiet descended sharper than fear. Rebecca and Ben stood alone in the garage, together and yet not. "There's still time to escape," he said. "I won't," she replied. "This ends tonight." At precisely 4:28 a.m. movement appeared on the shop's external camera feed. 4 black SUVs. No markings, no headlights, just death on wheels. Ben's breathing slowed. "They're here." He activated the garage's defense protocols, ones no one had seen in action, not since the day he left the battlefield. As the first team approached the shop, lights blinked off. Darkness swallowed them. Then, boom! An oil drum rigged to a tripwire exploded, sending the intruders scattering. Ben moved like lightning, hurling a smoke grenade and diving into the chaos. The attackers wore thermal vision, but Ben knew his terrain. He used hydraulic lifts for cover, jack handles as weapons, even spilled oil as a slick trap. The men fell one by one to a war they didn't understand. His war. In the back, Rebecca was a ghost. Her own training kicking in, she moved with efficiency, disabling one soldier with a wrench to the jaw and dragging another into the shadows. They worked in sync, no orders needed. But Rourke had anticipated resistance. As the team regrouped, a second explosion, this one precise, rocked the garage, not meant to kill, meant to disable. Ben went flying. His head hit the ground hard. Blood trickled down his temple. The world blurred. Voices echoed through the smoke. "Clear the back! Secure the package!" Heavy boots surrounded him. He felt hands grab his vest. A figure loomed above. Tall, cruel calm. Colonel Julian Rourke. "Enough of this theater," Rourke barked. "The asset comes with me. The mechanic," he sneered the word, "goes to prison for treason." Or worse. Rebecca emerged from the smoke bruised but defiant. "I'll go," she said, voice steady. "Just leave him and the girl alone." Rourke chuckled. Still sentimental even after the programming. Pity. His men bound her hands tight and cold. She locked eyes with Ben, still half-conscious on the floor. "It's okay," she whispered, voice trembling. "You saved me once. That's more than I deserved." As they dragged her toward the waiting SUVs, a single thought burned in Ben's mind, louder than pain, louder than the explosions. Not again. He had failed once. He would not fail twice. Pain coursed through Ben's skull like fire, but his eyes snapped open with brutal clarity. The taste of blood was metallic on his tongue, and the floor beneath him was vibrating. Engines rumbling outside, boots marching another war being packed neatly into SUVs. He blinked once, then twice, and then he remembered Rebecca, dragged away, just like 5 years ago. Except this time he knew her. This time he felt everything. The cold betrayal, the helplessness, the rage. He rolled to his side, wincing. His hand slid into his vest pocket, where a small, unremarkable object sat nestled in stitched fabric, his dog tags. But more importantly, the micro-beacon embedded within them. A GPS transponder. He'd activated it the second Rourke's message came through. He whispered hoarsely, "Tracker, find her." The signal blinked green. A satellite ping confirmed her location. Still inside the perimeter, en route to the highway. Ben stumbled to the wall and gripped a metal shelf for support. The world tilted, but his will did not. He yanked open a floor panel behind the main workbench and pulled out a duffel bag marked with faded stencils. Property of U.S.O. Marine Corps, Taylor B. Inside was what he had always hoped never to need again. Body armor, a sidearm, ammo, encrypted radio, and a burner phone with 4 numbers. He called one. The voice on the other end answered in a single breath. "You never call unless it's bad." Ben hissed through pain. "It's Rourke. He has the asset. I need an intercept." A pause. Then, coordinates. Ben relayed the signal. Within seconds, the other voice was barking orders to someone else. "You'll have satellite support in 15. Can you tail them until then?" Ben's eyes narrowed. "I'll do more than tail them." He killed the call. 10 minutes later, his battered Ford pickup, armored beneath the paint engine modified for torque, roared out of the garage like a war dog let loose. Ben drove one-handed, his shoulder-throbbing eyes scanning the road. The SUV convoy ahead was in formation, heading north toward a private airfield. But they had no idea he'd marked Rebecca. No idea that the mechanic they'd dismissed had once led classified rescue missions in deserts and jungles no maps dared show. He took a side road cutting through the woods. A second call came in. "This is Overwatch. Confirmed asset and lead vehicle. Rourke's on site. 4 SUV convoy. ETA to airfield, 20 minutes. Ben clicked the mic. "Tell the team to be ready to catch the pieces. I'm going in." He floored the gas pedal. Trees blurred. The truck bounced over ruts and roots. But Ben didn't slow. Not when he reached the clearing. Not when he saw the tail of the convoy. He slammed the brakes, turned the wheel hard, and fishtailed onto the road just behind the final SUV. They didn't see him. Yet, Ben reached under his seat, pulled out a launcher, non-lethal but effective, and fired. The projectile struck the back SUV's tire, releasing a spike of liquid nitrogen. Rubber froze, steel locked, the wheel exploded. The SUV spiraled and crashed into a ditch. Ben surged forward. Now the convoy knew. The second SUV swerved to block him, but Ben clipped its rear fender, sending it skidding sideways. He tore through the smoke and glass, gaining ground. A voice crackled through his comms. "Reinforcements en route. 5 minutes." "I need 3, Ben replied. The lead SUV tried to veer off-road. Ben followed, headlights cutting through trees. Inside, Rebecca felt the sudden shift, the violent stop and start of a vehicle under siege. Then, a flicker of something. Hope. She leaned toward the window and caught a glimpse of a truck barreling toward them, a figure behind the wheel that made her heart seize. "Ben," the driver beside her cursed, reaching for his weapon. Too late. The SUV jerked as Ben's truck rammed the rear bumper, spinning it into a tree. Rebecca slammed forward in her seat, then heard the door rip open. And there he was, bleeding, furious, alive. Ben yanked her out of the vehicle, shielded her with his body, and fired 2 rounds into the forest as more soldiers approached. "Go!" he shouted, dragging her toward the clearing. "Run for the tree line. I'm not leaving you. I didn't leave you 5 years ago, and I'm sure as hell not doing it now." She paused, just for a moment, then ran. As she vanished into the woods, helicopters thundered overhead. Reinforcements had arrived. But so had something Rourke never counted on. A man who remembered what it meant to fight for someone worth saving. The morning mist hadn't lifted yet from the Blue Ridge foothills, where Colonel Julian Rourke's private compound lay hidden behind layers of security stone and silence. It was a fortress built on secrets, a cold monument to betrayal and power. Inside, Sarah, no longer just Rebecca Lane, stood cuffed in a glass-walled interrogation room. Her face bore the bruises of her fall and the weight of recovered memories. But her eyes had changed. They were clear now, cold, a soldier's eyes. Rourke stood before her, hands folded behind his back, the same calculating smile he wore when he told her 5 years ago. "You have no past, only a mission." He spoke in measured tones. "You were supposed to disappear, clean, no memories, no loose ends. But you had to go and remember, didn't you?" Sarah didn't flinch. "I remembered everything. The mission, the men you abandoned, the one who saved me." Rourke's smile faded. "Taylor, he should have stayed buried." Sarah leaned forward. "He didn't, and he's coming." Rourke turned to his guards. "Move her to holding, prep extraction. We're leaving in 20, but he was already too late." Across the perimeter, Ben had returned, this time with help. Former special ops, burned agents, old friends who owed him favors no one could speak of, overwatch from satellites, ground intel from moles inside Rourke's network. They had watched Rourke build his empire from the ashes of classified missions. Now they were here to dismantle it. Ben led the charge. His approach was surgical. No wasted movements, no second chances. Guards were neutralized in pairs, explosives disabled, systems hacked, and as they advanced deeper into the compound, Sarah did her part. Because the woman they thought they'd broken had learned from Rourke. She picked her cuffs, disarmed her captor, used a coffee mug to break a biometric scanner, and triggered the failsafes they had been stupid enough to show her during training. By the time Ben reached the command center, Sarah was already inside, wiping hard drives, pulling data. The steel door crashed open. Ben stepped into the room, breath-ragged eyes burning with fire. Sarah looked up. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. Then Rourke entered from the far side, flanked by his last loyal soldier. His voice, low and venomous, echoed. "I underestimated you both." Ben leveled his pistol. "Yeah, you did." Rourke raised his hands, amused. "You think this changes anything? You think anyone's going to believe 2 disgraced ghosts over me?" Sarah stepped forward. "No, but they'll believe this." She tossed a USB drive onto the table. Video footage, wire transfers, contracts with foreign agents, all of it. "You're finished." Rourke's mask cracked. His hands twitched. Ben caught the motion first. "Don't." Rourke lunged for the sidearm holstered on his man's belt. A shot rang out. He staggered. Ben lowered his weapon. Rourke hit the floor. The compound's alarms fell silent. Outside, the FBI rolled in. Backed by federal warrants and armed with evidence Sarah had spent months gathering in secret, even before her memories had fully returned. Because some part of her knew, even when she didn't remember names or faces, that the monster who raised her was building a lie. Ben watched as agents handcuffed Rourke's surviving men. Drones circled overhead. Helicopters thudded across the mountain sky. Sarah stood at his side, eyes still locked on the chaos she'd helped unravel. Ben turned to her. "You okay?" She nodded. "I am now." He took her hand gently, and for the first time in 5 years, they both felt something that had long been missing. Peace, not because the war was over, but because they had survived it, together. 3 months later, the town of Fairgrove had traded its autumn fog for a quiet blanket of snow. Christmas lights glowed softly against white rooftops, and the smell of pine and cinnamon lingered in every warm doorway. At the edge of town, where mechanics once fixed old Fords and strangers once fled assassins, Taylor's Auto and Security Services now stood with a fresh coat of paint and a brand new sign. The garage still repaired cars, but in the back, discreetly it also offered risk assessments, private defense consulting, and discreet counter-surveillance solutions. No one asked too many questions. Small towns know when to mind their own business. Inside, the smell of burnt pancakes filled the kitchen. "I followed the recipe exactly," Sarah groaned, squinting at a splatter of batter on the ceiling. Ben chuckled from the sink. "Well, step 1 says, don't cook like a software engineer." She stuck out her tongue and flopped into a chair. Maddie, now an official pancake inspector, poked the stack with a plastic spatula. "I give these a solid 6 out of 10. Points for effort, -3 for ceiling batter." Sarah grinned. Tough crowd. The trio sat around the kitchen table, warmth radiating from the oven, from the tree sparkling in the corner, and from the unspoken joy of normalcy. Above the mantel hung 3 sets of dog tags, framed carefully displayed. Ben's original pair from the Corps, Sarah's newly issued set engraved with her real name, Sarah Elaine Park, and a custom pair gifted by Maddie made from silver-plated keychains that read, Maddie Taylor, daughter inventor, future ruler of Earth. The laughter came easy now. So did the love. Sarah still worked remotely with Sentinel Solutions, now headquartered in a converted warehouse across town. With federal backing and full immunity, she was building tech to protect lives, not exploit them. Maddie was thriving, her coding skills light years ahead of her class, her bedroom decorated with circuits and glitter in equal measure. And Ben had found his peace. Not by burying the past, but by honoring it. He didn't wear the uniform anymore, but every time he walked into his garage, or kissed Sarah on the porch, or watched Maddie build something new from nothing, he knew the mission hadn't ended. It had just begun. As snow drifted past the frosted window panes, Sarah leaned into Ben's side, her fingers laced with his. Any regrets, he whispered. She looked at him, her smile warm and sure, only that it took us this long to find our way back. He kissed her gently, and for the first time in years, the future felt wide open. Quiet, simple, and full of promise. In the end, it wasn't the firepower, the encrypted data, or the battlefield tactics that changed everything. It was the choice. The choice to protect even when it hurt. The choice to remember even when forgetting was easier. The choice to love after so much loss. Ben and Sarah didn't just survive. They rebuilt. Not because they were fearless, but because they faced fear together. Not because they escaped the darkness, but because they brought light to it. And Maddie, wise beyond her years, became the quiet symbol of what was truly worth fighting for. Her laughter became the music in their new home, her curiosity the heartbeat of hope. She never asked for the past. She simply believed in the future. Fairgrove, once just a quiet dot on a forgotten map, had become the backdrop of something extraordinary. A family that rose from ruin, forged not by blood, but by choice and sacrifice. And as the snow settled gently on the rooftops, as light spilled from the kitchen window, as love filled a once empty space, it was clear some battles are meant to be fought. But the greatest victories, they don't come with medals or headlines. They come in quiet moments. A child's giggle, a shared glance, a hand held at the breakfast table. They come when we choose to stay, to fight for each other, to begin again. And in that small garage at the edge of town, surrounded by tools, memories, and warmth, they did exactly that. They began again.